Hi, I'm Mackenzie.
Hi, I'm Denise, and welcome to the podcast from Rundown to Renewed. We are so excited to have you guys here for the month of June. We are going to be talking about prayer this month, and something that when we were talking through this, we realized, a lot of times in prayer, sometimes there's this nervousness with
Mhm.
it,
Yeah.
or there's like this fear almost,
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes people just feel like they don't know what to say. Like there's a
Mhm.
certain um there's a certain set of rules to praying and you
Or
don't
you
know what to
think there
say.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you struggle with what to say in your prayers.
Yes. Yes. Or we remain safe in our prayers by just saying the same prayers over and over again. Like it becomes more of a ritual and less
Mm,
of a personal conversation with
yeah.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like when our prayers are like this, we sometimes just struggle to pray at all
Hmm.
because we're remaining comfortable. We're not being stretched in any way. And it's really easy to say, Lord, bless my burger and fries, right?
Right.
But it's harder to get into those hard prayers that are going to lead you outside of your comfort zone.
Well, right. And I mean, simple prayers,
Mm,
while, you know, nice, they're not the same as safe.
yeah.
And when when we start to break through our barriers with prayer, whatever that might look like. I mean, I think it's different for everybody. But when we start to break through those things, we realize that Jesus isn't going to call us to do something that he himself wouldn't do. He desires for us to have a life of faith, not necessarily a life of comfort. And I think comfort is what a lot of us, I think all of us want comfort, actually. I don't think a lot of us want comfort. I think all of us to a degree want comfort.
For
We
sure.
we don't want discomfort. We want safety, not unsafety, you know?
Hmm.
Um, and a life with Jesus is anything but comfortable or safe. Yeah.
You're right. And I mean, if you look at Jesus's life, his life was not comfortable at
No.
all either.
Mm-mm.
I mean, even up to the cross, the point of almost being crucified, he knew it was coming.
Mhm.
And he goes and prays by himself and he asks the Lord, he says, please let this cup pass me by.
Yeah.
But he's like, not my will, but your will.
Yeah.
And I think that that is so powerful because how often are we praying for something and we are just not praying for God's will, just our own personal fleshly
Right.
wants and desires.
Right. And it's not that our desires are bad, or maybe sometimes they are, but but I think that there's something to be said about going to God and simply saying, I really want this to happen, but not necessarily asking him what he desires for us, because
Yeah.
ultimately what he desires for us is better. And I mean, Jesus's death on the cross, while horrific in the moment, is now he's now our savior,
Hmm.
and we can have that relationship with him, and we can have a direct line to God because of Jesus. I mean, he is the sacrificial lamb. And so but that was deeply unsafe
Mm-hmm.
and deeply uncomfortable and painful for Jesus, but he did it anyway. And if he can do such a thing, what can the things that he can do through us, what beautiful things can come out of that. And something that when we were working through all this, we were thinking about what are some, kind of uncomfortable, unsafe prayers or periods in our lives where God was calling us to do things that were out of our comfort zone and out of the box for us. And for me, I thought about this time of my life in college where I I really felt called to study abroad. And while studying abroad probably sounds fancy and exciting, and it is, for me, it was fancy and exciting, but it was also absolutely terrifying. I'm so close. Like relationships are everything to me, and I'm so close to my family and my friends, and the thought of going across the world into a different culture, into different, I mean, everything. There's a lot of differences,
Mhm.
and but I really felt this tug, and I remember at the time, it was my junior year of college, and I was taking a class. I was focused on the Book of Acts. And if you've ever read the Book of Acts, it's the book that comes after all the Gospels, and there are amazing accounts of faith in that book. It's a great read. 10 out of 10 recommend. And it was just this confirmation over and over again of, Denise, you have to step out of your box. You have to get out of what's comfortable in order to grow with me. Like, this is the next step. And so it was like I couldn't hold on to everything that was comfortable anymore. I had to step out, and I had to trust that God was going to provide, because I was losing. When you studied abroad, you lost, I think in the spring, it was like 60% of your scholarship money was gone because you
Wow.
were in another country. And it was like, okay, God, how are you going to provide 60% of this? And I kid you not, I remember when I got accepted into the program, I went into the student min office, and the secretary and my professors knew about, like, that I had applied and that I was waiting to hear back. And when I heard back and was accepted, I went to her and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she's like, well, Denise, it's already covered. Like, we have a grant that's going to cover it for you. And that was just such a confirmation
Mhm.
of like, you need to do this. And I kid you not, I went to Australia for 4 months, and it radically changed my life. It changed my faith. It was so um, encouraging and empowering, and it stretched me. I mean, because Australia is like 14 hours ahead of it. So talking to that was back when like Skype was a thing. I don't even think Zoom was a thing yet. And so, but like finding time to actually talk to my family was really difficult. I had never spent a holiday away from them. Like,
Yeah.
so I didn't get to have Easter with them. Like, these were big stretches for me,
Mhm.
but it set me up for growth and encouragement. And now, I mean, I am still really good friends with some of those people. My roommate and I are still very tight, even though we live across the country from each other. I mean, it's there, the amount of good and blessings that have come from that and have still come from that, because I
Mhm.
chose to not stay safe and to trust that God was going to do really amazing things. It's unmatched.
Yeah.
It's unreal. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, that was a really unsafe prayer for you to
Hmm.
pray, like, Lord, send me if if
Yeah.
it's your
If I'm
will.
supposed to.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that that is really unsafe in good ways.
Yeah, I mean, I'm ready to go back. That's one of my goals, is to take my kids to Australia
No,
when they're a little
awesome.
older. Yeah,
Yeah.
and can handle the plane ride because it's
Yeah.
a long one.
I think a turning point for me was watching one of my best friend's dads pass away from cancer. And just an extremely godly family. Everything that he did, he aligned with the Bible,
Mm.
and he knew he was going to be glorifying God in his death or in his healing. And all of it was so horrible and beautiful.
Mm.
And watching them go through these different things. And I mean, if you believe God is real, the devil is real also.
Right.
And he was working really hard against this family, and I was able to see some of those things. And I just remember I didn't grow up talking about the devil or anything, and so I just remember having so much fear with some of these stories that I was
Hmm.
told. And I was like, Lord, I do not want to be a scared Christian. I do not want to be filled with this fear that I felt. And I like, to the point of, there was one situation that happened, and I had to call my husband on the way home. It was dark out. I was so scared. He's like, is someone in the car with you? Like,
Mhm.
do I need to be worried? And I was like, I just need you to stay on the phone with me and we'll talk about it when I get home. Like, I was trembling with fear.
Wow.
And I was just like, I do not want to be a lukewarm Christian. I do
Mhm.
not want to be
Mhm.
filled with fear.
Mhm.
And that's when this spark happened inside of me that was like, Lord, search me and change me because I am not okay.
Yeah. Well, and staying in a fearful state, I mean, that's a lonely place.
Right.
And that's like you're like hyper vigilant to
Right.
everything when you're
Mm,
afraid all the time.
yeah,
And that's exhausting.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that, in that moment when I sat and I prayed to God, that was personal and from my heart, right?
Mm, mhm.
And when you're praying from your heart, there's no way to mess it up.
Yeah.
It's unmistakable. And God knows that when you're praying from your heart. And um in this book that we're reading, we it says that each prayer from your heart is like a fingerprint. So
Oh, that's
everything is
so good.
different, but it's exactly put for you and God. And I think that that is so special because there's no specific words you have to pray or specific way to pray. Like God just wants to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, and he already knows, like he knows what bothers you. He knows what you're afraid of. He knows what brings you joy. He know like all of these things. He created you. He
Right.
knows, and so he knew that you were full of fear
Right.
and he put you in a position where the fear was not going to go away.
Hmm.
And it's like he allowed for that to happen so that and that fear like drove you closer to him,
Yeah.
and the fear that I had of leaving and being away from everything that I had known and everything that I had learned, because I remember even coming back from Australia, my faith was different. And I
Mm,
wrestled with like the differences that I experienced of faith in Australia and then what I was experiencing of like faith and church and all those things here. I mean, it
mm,
was it was a wrestling, but it was a good thing. It made my faith stronger. And
yeah.
I know that was a huge piece of why he wanted me to go. He wanted me to grow,
Hmm.
and I think, you know, whenever we're unsure how to pray, one of my favorite places to go is the Psalms.
Yeah.
Um, David does everything in the Psalms and other that's not just David in the Psalms, but he's a major author of a lot of the Psalms. And he cries out to God. He is angry. He's pleading with God when he's in danger. There's so many things. And a really good one is Psalm 13, verses 1 through 2. It says, "How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me?" I mean, you want to talk about honesty.
Right.
There it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There was no sugarcoating
Mm-mm.
anything he was going through.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times our prayers will require us to step outside of our comfort zones.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many different things about our comfort zone. So let's go through some attributes of a comfort zone. What would you say one is?
Oh, I mean, I think like a comfort zone with like prayer specifically is like your standard prayer.
Mm,
Maybe you're taught a certain prayer to pray at mealtime.
yeah.
You just kind of recite words.
Yeah. That's a
It's
good one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think another one is going to God with all of your needs, kind of treating them like a vending machine. Like you're putting in this prayer, so now you should get back what you want.
It's transactional. Yeah.
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 And prayer is not transactional.
No. No. Well, and I think too, when you're treating it that way, and we're all guilty of that.
For
Okay.
sure.
Like
Yes.
Mackenzie and I are not sitting here thinking we are above anybody listening
No.
because that's not it. Please hear us when we say that. But I think when you're treating it that way, you're not asking God the hard questions. You're not really
Mm,
asking him to change you in any way. It's all about what he can do for you
yeah.
versus what he wants to do in you
Mm,
and what he wants to do through you
yeah.
for your good and his glory.
Yeah, and I think that like with our comfort zone, if you look at it like a circle, okay?
Mm.
And then on the outside of that, picture a donut with me.
Oh, I
The
love a donut.
middle the middle is your comfort zone. The outside portion that you take a bite out of
Mm,
is your growth zone. So in order to get to that growth zone, what do you have to do? Step outside your comfort
mhm,
zone.
mhm.
And what is going to happen over time is that your comfort zone is going to extend.
Yeah,
It's going to get larger and larger because now these things that used to be out of your comfort zone, they are now in your comfort zone. And you're growing and evolving as your comfort zone is expanding.
yeah. That's so good.
So I think that we need to just start asking what God wants. How how can we change for him, for his glory,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
Instead of looking at other people and saying they're the problem, right?
mhm.
And
Oh, yeah.
listening to sermons and being like, "Oh, this is great for
For
this
this person, I
person."
wish they were sitting here with me right now. Maybe they'd get the point.
Because
You've all done it.
yeah.
Don't you dare tell me you haven't. We
It's
have too, okay?
it's true.
Okay.
It's true. Um but rather than taking that moment and being like, okay, Lord, how what are you trying to reveal to me? What needs changed in me?
Mhm,
What needs changed in my heart?
mhm.
Yeah.
I don't know why I thought of this, but I was working with a business coach a while ago, and we talked about comfort zones.
Mm,
And she had me draw this like really, it was, I think it was a circle because you talked
okay.
about a donut, but she
Uh-huh.
talked, it was the same concept of this like circle. And it was like your comfort zone was this like little circle in the middle of this like super large, and she had me like shade it in.
Hmm.
And it's like, what are the things that um you feel led to? What are the things that you feel called to, but you're not
Hmm.
doing it? And she had me write it like outside of the circle.
Oh,
Yeah. And it was like, okay, now like how are you going to get there? Like
yeah.
how's your comfort zone going to get stretched in order to get to those places that you feel called to?
Yeah. And I
So,
think that, if we're not stretching, we're not stepping out of our comfort zone, we are setting ourselves up to miss out on the blessings that God has for us.
yeah. Absolutely.
A dangerous prayer that I prayed for a couple years where I was just like, Lord, search me and know me and
Hmm.
reveal to me all of these things.
Yeah.
But it was with the company that I was working with, and I had worked really hard for a title, and that title meant so much to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. It was a big one.
It was so exciting. Like I made it, all of these things, but
Hmm.
I felt the Lord calling me to homeschool and calling me to create that foundational space for our family and just like bring everything back to the way it was a long time ago, right? Before our society wrestled with this busy culture.
Mhm.
Um, but don't get me started. We'll go. That's
That's
another
a
podcast.
whole thing.
I mean, we've touched on it before, but I just felt God calling me to this, and I was like, "How can I do both?" Because I put in so many hours for my
Right.
job,
Right.
and I also need the income for that. But I
Mhm.
feel God leading me towards this way that provides zero income, that provides zero freedom. Hello, mothers out there that send their kids to school, and you're like, "Yes, 7 hours." No more 7 hours.
Yep. Not anymore.
And, I prayed. I asked the Lord to take this title away from me if I was not supposed to have it.
Mm.
And and that was hard. That was a
Yeah.
hard
So it's a
prayer.
bold prayer.
But he showed me what was important to him in that moment. And there was even there was even one part where I was like, "Are you sure, Lord? Are you sure this is it?"
Mhm.
And it was like he was telling me, "Go ahead, like you can have it, you can keep it, but you're gonna miss out on what I'm going to offer you instead."
Wow.
And I was just
Mm,
like, "I do not want to miss out. Sign me up."
yeah. But that goes back to that comfort piece again.
Right.
I mean, when you choose, yeah, that's I don't even know. Like there's so much to that when it comes to like what God has to offer us versus what we think
Yeah.
is good. And like your title and your business are good things.
Right.
They're great, but God was saying, I have something better.
Right.
And that's like, yeah, that's really
Yeah, and like I said, it was
cool.
complete faith because I needed that income for our family budget.
Right.
So where was that income going to come from now? And you know what happened? The Lord
Yeah,
provided.
he did. He did. That's a really cool story, actually. Yeah. Well, and I think for me, that's actually something that I am, as I've been praying recently, God, what search me? Like
Mm,
what do we need to work through?
right.
What's going on inside me? What's keeping me, you know, in whatever, in fear or in uncertainty or whatever? And something over the last, I would say like week, but I've known this for a very long time, is I've had this since what probably I think forever, honestly. I really do. Like the more I sit with it and like certain examples come up from high school and college and like my early, like all of my 20s and recently, I have a, a scarcity mindset, like big time. Like I worry about, is God going to provide?
Mm.
How is this going to work out? What's God going to do? And it keeps me, I like thrive on being frugal. like, like I just think I'm so cool when I like save money. And hey, I mean, that's not a bad thing, but I think I wrestle with, well, should I get this? Like, should I?
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, I think way too much about expenses,
Mm,
way, way too much. And this has been going on for the longest time. Like, for
yeah.
whatever reason, I think I should just always be saving all the time because some catastrophe is going to happen and I'm going to need $1 million.
Yep.
I don't have $1 million, okay.
That's
But
why you continually save
but that's why I
for
continually save. There's
yeah.
like this fear and God keeps showing it to me. I mean,
Mm,
and even in something so small as groceries last week, I was making a dish with I bought like a fresh mozzarella ball and I gave my girls the leftover from what I didn't use. And my oldest came up to me and she goes, Mom, next time, can you get two of these so that we have more? And I'm just like, oh, I literally only bought what we needed for this week. I didn't buy excess. I didn't buy and I've been doing that forever. And again, I don't think that that's a bad thing, but I do think it limits me.
mm,
And I do think that there is a lack of trust
yeah.
in God and in what he'll do. And I even shared, I mean, when I went to Australia, God covered it. I mean, immediately. Like he didn't even let me sit on this lack of finances.
Mhm.
Like he covered it immediately.
Right.
And that put my dad's mind at ease too, because my dad was freaking out too. So everybody was affirmed that
Yeah.
I needed to go overseas. But that is something that I mean, that is like deeply embedded in me. And that's something that God is trying to, he's being very kind
Mm,
about it. And that's another thing I think sometimes, and I remember when I went through this dangerous prayer study on the Bible app before we started reading the book. One of it goes with the book. And one of the things it said was about search me. And
mm.
she's the one that sent me this study. So I text her and I was like, I don't like today's I don't like today's lesson. It's
Like
search me. And she sent me a meme back. And I was like, nope, don't like that. Like
yeah, but if you don't like that, you're really not gonna like the next
you're
one.
really not gonna like the next stuff. And so I think too, when we ask God to search us and help us to know him and know ourselves better, I think there's this fear of like, oh my gosh, what's he going to tell me? He's going to
Right.
tell me I'm this horrible person,
Mhm.
because we live in a,
Performance.
this performance, the
Yeah.
survival mentality
Yeah.
of like, when's the worst thing happening? We have to be prepared all the time. And what I'm finding, and I've learned over the years too, and I think it's just a continual lesson, is if God is searching you, he's not gonna like whip you into shape. Like,
Right.
he's gonna be kind.
He's very gracious.
He's very gracious, he's loving, he's kind. And so if there's a fear there, I just want to encourage you with that, because he there are times where he can be more firm. But what I've noticed with me is that he's very gracious, and he's
Mhm.
very kind, and he's very patient.
Very.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do we not listen? And he's still like, I'm right here,
Well,
ready.
and that's kind of like with our kids too. I mean,
Right.
when you love them, do you get impatient with them? Sure, but
Yeah.
they're
That
still
doesn't
they're still,
stop
you
you
don't
from
you
loving
don't
them.
stop loving them.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So over the rest of June, we're going to be going through this book called Dangerous Prayers, because following Jesus was never meant to be safe.
No. We're excited. We're excited to share with you what we're learning, what some of the book says. We highly encourage you to pick it up. It's very good. It will challenge you and encourage you.
Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
and this whole thing is change your prayers, change your life.
Amen.
And those things can happen when we step out of our comfort zone and we start praying dangerous prayers.
Yeah, I'm here for it. It's a little nerve wracking, but
It's,
it's worth it. And I mean, we've shared, we're testaments to that,
yeah.
of what he can do.
Hmm. Yeah. And sometimes he calls you to leave the country and go on a trip. And sometimes he calls you to just be a good steward in your workplace.
That's right.
you
Yeah,
know?
it's different for
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah.
Yeah. So don't think that, God is going to call you to something big and extravagant when it could just be something really simple and a
Hmm.
shift in your current life right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's both.
Yep.
Hmm.
So we are going to end today with some questions that we'll continue to talk about in our community Facebook page. If you're not a part of that, make sure you join.
Hmm.
And our first question is, where are you staying safe in your prayers?
Yeah. And then also, are you willing to start praying out of your comfort zone?
Hmm, so good.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll continue these conversations over in our Facebook page, and we will have a new podcast next week
Hmm.
on the first section in this Dangerous Prayers book. I forget how to end this.
That's okay.
What do I say?
If you're feeling run down, there's space for you at our table.